Mr. Stephen Amell, who joins us now on Busted Open. Sir, thank you so much for the time, and thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me. Good to see you guys.
No, thank
Steven,
you, man.
Where are you this morning, Stephen? Where are you talking to us from?
I'm in Los Angeles, California. I'm up in Laurel Canyon, and we're just finally getting a little taste of fall after some really hot weather. It's my favorite time of year here. It's really nice.
Stephen, we're going to throw a lot of flowers your way. So there's going to be a lot of praise and everything, but I got to start with a little bit of a bone I got to pick with you. Okay.
Here we
go. Wait, you did an interview with Chris Van Vliet, who we love. Chris is an awesome guy, has an awesome show. But in that interview, you talked about how, you know what? I don't really look at it as seasons 1 and season 2 dropping on Netflix. It's really just as a whole, because it's one season. The end of season 1 goes right into season 2. So you look at it as like all the episodes dropping. Stephen, been spending a lot of time with this hashtag heel season 3. All right. You got to help me. You got to help me here. You're not helping the hashtag.
No,
Stephen,
hey, listen, absolutely. No, there's a definite difference between season 1 and season 2. You can see it. I mean, just based off the fact that the first season was primarily written by Michael Waldron, with the second season primarily being written by Mike O'Malley, who was our showrunner throughout. Yeah. Obviously, I'm not talking about it because there was a definitive difference for me personally between season 1 and season 2. I'm simply appealing to the masses in terms of how they should digest the story. That's it. If there is a hashtag that gets us, we want it to be hashtag heel season 3. And look, no one took my advice, by the way. It says season 1 and season 2 right there on Netflix. So the logical step forward would be changing it from a Starz original to a Netflix original or a Netflix series, something like that. But I apologize.
No, it's okay. You know what, Stephen? Apology accepted. Now,
can we get to the compliments, please?
Yes, because you deserve a lot of them.
Thank you,
Stephen. I watched it on Starz. I love the show. I have not hidden the fact that I love the show. Obviously, I have my Duffy. You know, I have the garb. I have the merch. I'm a big fan. I actually, and maybe this tells you more about my life than anything else, I binged watched both seasons yesterday because I had no problem watching this again. How proud are you of the fact that this show is getting a second chance and has found a home on Netflix?
Well, you really hope that when it does find a home on Netflix, that it resonates with their audience because the algorithm does its work. But the first step is finding a home on Netflix in the first place. And I don't think that they would have, I don't know how much of a chance a giant conglomerate like Netflix has to take on a little show like this, but the fact that they're giving us space and time on their platform, I think speaks to the quality of the show that we made. And again, I just really hope that people can get past the whole, I mean, I love the pro wrestling aspect of it, but that does always seem to be this, whether it's a misconception or not, but it creates this barrier to entry. It's like, well, I don't really know if I like pro wrestling. Well, just do me a favor. Go watch the show. Maybe I'm talking to the wrong audience right now, but just go watch the show. Like, bring along your wife, bring along your boyfriend, bring along your girlfriend, you know, that may not be a pro wrestling fan, and I promise you, they will like it.
So, Stephen, when did you start becoming a pro wrestling fan?
1987.
Who was the first wrestler you ever seen?
The first match that I really remember would be Savage Steamboat at WrestleMania 3, because someone actually just gave me the DVD, and then I went back and I got the DVD for WrestleMania 1, WrestleMania 2. I think that there was a SummerSlam or a Survivor Series mixed in there, but yeah, I was a massive fan through the late 80s into the early 90s, fell off, came back when you and a bunch of other guys started changing the game a little bit in terms of, as well with Mark as well, during the Attitude Era. Had another little lull right there, but then when I started interacting with Cody Rhodes back in 2015, obviously I started watching the product again. I mean, there were always parts that I watched, but I ebbed and flowed, like I
Sure.
think a lot of wrestling fans do.
And I'm sure you had a respect for the wrestling industry, Stephen. But
Yes.
when when was your respect for the wrestling industry reinforced? Is it once you got involved, once you trained, once you got in a ring, once you had an actual match? When did the light bulb go off for you and you go, wow, this is considerably different than I, probably ever thought it was?
Well, it's the first thing that happens. What happens when you get into a ring? The very, very first time that you get into a ring, you run the ropes and you're like, oh, this is going to be so much fun, until it's not. And it's not fun at all, because the ropes are not ropes, they are cables. So your back is aching. And then inevitably, somebody brings you into the middle of the ring and they go, all right, fall down. And you go, what do you mean? Just fall down flat on your back. And they show you how to do it. And the first time that you do it, I'm sure you guys know, you forget to tuck your chin, the back of your head smacks the mat, which is not a mat, it's a board. And you get back up and you're seeing stars. And for a second there, you're like, I'm done. I'm never doing this again. And it was being with the guys, being out there on a loop. We went through a loop of, it was Vancouver Island, Vancouver proper, and then Everett, Washington. And I was with Cody, a bunch of the New Day was there. I think Roman was on the loop. And then I met all the guys when they came back from an Australia tour in Everett, Washington for Raw. And just, these guys driving from city to city, the camaraderie in the locker room, watching guys plan matches and go through matches and kind of call them, with the referee in the dressing room beforehand, which is something that we incorporated into, I think, the first episode of season 2 of Heels. I was telling Mike O'Malley about it, about how guys kind of call the match before they go out. The respect was really instantaneous. Again, the minute that you run the ropes, the minute that you take one flat back bump, or you feel a chop for the first time, everyone loves yelling woo when they're watching it on TV. But man, oh man, when it lands, it doesn't feel good at all.
And I think that for me as a fan, because obviously I'm not a professional, I'm not a wrestler, but as a fan, the thing that I fell in love with Heels instantly was you can tell that this was made by people who respected the business. A lot of times as fans, we tease TV shows and movies where they make professional wrestling look like a joke. You guys were extremely genuine in what it is and what this industry is like, the ups and downs and the ebbs and flows. So for that, you should be really proud of what you were able to accomplish in these first 2 seasons.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, we wanted to make sure it's a tough needle to thread, because you really want to, so much of pro wrestling is psychology and really getting the fans on your side or against you, as the case may be. And just with the very nature of television, we don't have time to show that slow build and that psychology. So a lot of the matches really are just, they're kind of a montage, and they're the high spots, but we still wanted to make sure that for every match we charted out a story and that it was moving the story forward, in the ring and out of the ring for our characters. So I really appreciate that. And the response from people in the business has been especially kind. One stands out to me. I was backstage in an AEW show, and Arn Anderson came up to me. He was on the loop that I first did with WWE, with Cody. And he just comes up, he goes, where'd you get some of this stuff? How do you know some of this stuff? And that's like the highest of praise, I think.
Stephen, I'm a fan. We had our interactions and
Yeah,
from
man.
the WWE days and AEW. I can't wait to see your face right now when Dave tells you how he single-handedly saved Heels.
I didn't single-handedly save Heels, but I don't say that, Mark. You back. But what I did do is I was angry, and I'm sure like maybe anger is an emotion you felt when the show was canceled. I remember being out to dinner with my wife and seeing the news that the show was canceled. Probably shouldn't be on the phone while I'm out to dinner with my wife. But anyway, that's another story for another day. That's why I've been married 3 times. But I saw that the show was canceled, and I was really upset because what had happened in season 2, as good as season 1 was, I thought the show went to another level in season 2. And the way that season 2 ended, you want to see more. So I went I had no problem going on the air the next day and just, just venomous hatred towards Stars for canceling the show. And I understand Stars gave a home to heels. But Steven, you know this as an actor. The TV show MASH, the TV show Cheers, the TV show Seinfeld. Those are 3 of the biggest shows in the history of television. But it took time for those shows to find an audience. Cheers was the lowest rated show the year that it debuted, but it wound up being the highest rated sitcom of its time. But it took time to find an audience. So I was more angry about that. You guys in season 2, that season dropped during the strike. So you guys couldn't promote the show. No, there was no promotion at all. And to pull the plug that quick, I thought was a crime. So I had no problem. And that Save Heels trended. And that night, there were signs on AEW Dynamite for Save Heels. And that shows that shows the dedication and the love that the pro wrestling industry has when they find a quality product, and Heels is a quality product.
Well, just like I was a fan of Arrow, Dave is a fan of Heels, like that. And
so Dave wants 8 seasons. That's what you're saying. He wants 8 seasons.
I want 8 seasons
and 170 episodes.
Steven, what I need, listen, I don't care what else you got going on in the industry. I want you to ink. Okay. It doesn't matter. What I want is for you to ink an 8-year deal so I get an additional 8 seasons of this show. Because, and I've said this before, the characters that I fell in love with, some of those characters I turned to despise. And some of the characters that I despised at the beginning of the show, I ultimately fell in love with, because that's life. There's a lot of layers to people, and it's not surface. And you guys had no problem digging in deep to these characters and personalities.
Well, I do really appreciate that. And I do think about, I look at a lot of things through the lens of my character, just because that's one of the ways that I have to approach the show. But we really are so young and new and at the beginning of the journey when it comes to what Jack might be able to do with the DWL, how it might meld with the FWD, how maybe they could take this promotion from this one small territory in the United States and try to make it into something bigger along the lines of WWE or AEW. We are really, I feel like we're like a mile into a 5-mile run in terms of what we could tell with the story, because we've never really left Duffy, right?
Yeah.
The show hasn't expanded beyond Duffy. And one of the real conceits, one of the real themes of the show is the aspiration to get past that small town that you started out in, which I think is something that almost every wrestler, I'm sure both of you guys, like, you started somewhere and it's like you had a dream of where you wanted to go to. And we haven't gotten near that yet on the show. So I thank you guys for all the support, because sometimes it can be just a little grassroots thing. They ran the first season of Mad Men like 7 times through on AMC before anyone realized that AMC was doing original programming. These things take time occasionally. Cheers, that example, slightly before my time, but I do appreciate it.
Dave is not wrong when he says we want 7, 8 seasons, because there's still so many things that I want to see. There's always I kind of got famous again in my career for my retirement. I can't wait to see somebody be forced into retirement and have to leave the show. Like that's real wrestling. I've seen a guy that I loved, that I drove in the car with, get paralyzed and never be able to walk again. I've seen, there's so many things that I've seen marriages break up and having to coddle one and stuff, like all of these things that happen in wrestling. We haven't seen it all.
Yeah.
There's so much to draw from.
Well, I can guarantee you that Mike O'Malley is either listening to this right now or listening to it when it comes up as a podcast, what have you. And he is furiously jotting down notes right now.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Bully and Dave and I, like, we love to sit down with y'all and just talk shop sometime.
Love that. Love that.
Well, we got to get a season 3. And you talk about deep storytelling and your character Jack Spade and what he's going through, taking over the family business and the reason why he had to take over the family business. Jack, I'm sure that's very relatable to a lot of people who have watched this show. Like, there's probably people that were put in that same position where they had no choice but to see this through. And that's the story of Jack Spade.
Yeah, that's such a universal story of someone having to carry the water for a parent, a friend, it's happening in multiple places. It's happening with Ace with expectations. It's happening with Jack with just the very real responsibility, financial and otherwise, that he had to take on within his community. It's happening with Bill. Not to spoil it for people that haven't seen it, but he's carrying secrets and he's carrying things that he did that, might make him a more virtuous person in other people's eyes that he's been asked to keep a secret. I mean, these are really universal storylines, which is another one of the reasons why you do not in any way, shape or form have to be a fan of pro wrestling to enjoy this show. Like I really enjoy both Kill Bills. I'm not a huge aficionado when it comes to the construction of samurai swords, and I don't have to be to enjoy the movie.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, and this is coming from an uber wrestling fan, I think the most impactful scene in the entire series so far is when, in a flashback scene where Tom Spade is talking to his wife about, hey, the kids being gone and how quiet the house is, and she pretty much breaks down, like, why she's not happy. And you just see the life just from his eyes and from his face just completely drained from his body. And it's like such an empty feeling. And you feel that for him, somebody who's, known as an alpha male. Like that scene has nothing to do with professional wrestling, has nothing to do with in-ring action. But that is maybe the most impactful scene of the entire series so far. And there's a few of them. But like you said, I watched the show with my wife. My wife is not a wrestling fan, but she's a fan of heels just because of scenes like that and character development like that.
Look, we love to hear that. That's great.
Now, for you, you've given a lot to this show. You've given literally your heart and your body to this show. So right away, an injury occurred, correct? Like, wasn't it almost immediately filming this show?
Our first day of shooting wrestling, our first scene was me doing a coast to coast. And, you're running and gunning back in the day and you really don't think. We could have shot it from a couple of different angles. We could have put a mat down and we did the first take and I did fine. So I'm supposed to do the coast to coast, drag the guy out into the center of the ring, cover him for the 1, 2, 3. And I didn't clear as much of the ring as I wanted to. So I did it again. Unbelievably, I did it again. And I went too far and I basically landed at a 90-degree angle sitting up and down. And I had a compression fracture to my T10 and L1 on our first day of wrestling. So stupid. So dumb. We got so much smarter immediately. Mark, it reminded me of on the pilot of Arrow, I was pointing actual arrows at people. I was like, I remember I got in touch with the producers and I went, guys, we should probably come up with an alternative option here because I don't think this is going to end well. So I've given a lot to the show, and frankly, I'm certainly not the only one. Both seasons, we created something called the Heels Gymnasium, partly because it was cool, partly out of necessity through COVID and the fact that we couldn't go to a regular gym. But you talk about Alexander Ludwig and Alan Maldonado and Chris Bauer and Kelly Berglund. I could name everybody. People came on this show and they transformed their bodies. I told the producers, I was like, if you expect us to do this, then you need to make our weight training, our in-ring training, not something that's expected of us, but something that's demanded because it's part of our schedule. and they acquiesced, which is something that you don't really expect from a first-year show. It's more like, no, you guys go figure this out on your own. But no, they built it in, they incorporated it into our schedule. And I was working almost every day, it would seem like, but people that weren't working every day, they were still coming to the gym every day and working hard. And I think that you see that because as much as we can and as safely as we can, we want our cast to do as much of the wrestling as is humanly possible.
Steven, kind of a two-part question here. I want to go back to the coast to coast. You're talking about a Rob Van Dam coast to coast, correct?
Correct.
Were you doing this in a traditional sized ring? Like, were you going 18 to 18, 16 to 16? Did you guys cut it down?
No, it was a traditional size ring because I did it at All In against Christopher Daniels. And when I did it in the match, all I needed to do was make sure that I could cover enough distance. And I didn't really ask. I just sort of assumed that as opposed to doing it the way that Rob does it beautifully, which is landing flat in his back and breaking it up, or I think Shane does it this way too, although I swear I've seen him smack his head a number of times. I just thought, okay, I'll bail out at the last minute and I'll land on my left butt cheek. Fractured my hip. So I mean, if you ever see me doing the coast to coast again, it's a clear sign that I'm not happy anymore in my marriage, because my wife will kill me if I do the coast to coast ever again. But no, full size ring.
Wow. And earlier on in the conversation, you talked about trying to pay attention to the psychology of the matches that were airing on Heels, even though you're showing them in little clips. Who behind the scenes helps you guys to keep the psychology and the integrity of the matches together once they get written for you?
In the second season, we definitely had a guy that had worked with the WWE. It's been a couple of years now, and I'm terribly sorry for this.
Well,
one,
I know Luke Hawks is involved. Luke Hawks is involved, right?
And then we had Luke Hawks as well, just making sure that we were getting in, we were scripting a match, because we had a match in the second season that was Jack Spade against Crystal Tyler. And by all rights, if you're doing the traditional tale of the tape, I probably have 120 pounds on her. So how can we create a match where, again, not to spoil it, but she wins and she wins clean? And I just went, well, it has to be Jack's ego. Jack doesn't take her seriously, so his hubris becomes his weakness, and she preys upon his vanity, and she just catches him in a moment where he's not expecting it. So all of that stuff is important, because, I mean, if we're not using in-ring psychology, then James Harrison would be the DWL champion and he would be undefeated.
Yeah.
Chavo Guerrero worked with y'all too, right?
He worked with a bunch of the cast in Los Angeles. I never got a chance to work with him. Our schedules weren't lining up. And then that was in very early 2020, January, more like February, March, because we were originally supposed to go to camera in April of 2020. And then obviously we're delayed several months because of the pandemic. And then everything had to shift to Atlanta.
Steven, is this possibly, I know it's crazy saying this because the show was canceled, but could this be a blessing in disguise? Because you're on Stars, which is a much smaller platform than Netflix, but also the landscape of professional wrestling is about to change. Monday Night Raw is going to be on Netflix. So I would think that's going to have to give a big boost to this show and people watching this show.
I mean, I think that there were a lot of things that we really wanted to do that we weren't able to do because of what happened in the world with COVID. I know that I, right from the jump, wanted to bring Cody on to be involved in the show. And this would have been back when he was either AEW was just starting or was just about to start or had just started. That almost worked out, and then it didn't. There were a lot of things that we wanted to do with the show. Consistency of production. It was almost 2 years in between season 1 and season 2 in terms of people being able to see it. So could it be a blessing in disguise that we're on the biggest platform in the world? Well, it was a very roundabout road that we took there, but it certainly could be. Netflix is, and I've said it a million times, doing press for this launch. it really is a truth teller. If you have a good show, people will find it, whether they advertise it or not. If enough people find it, enough people give it the double thumbs up, which is important. I know, not just the single, the double, like or love. It'll find an audience. There you go. That's great.
Yeah,
it will find an audience. So it could be a blessing in disguise for sure.
And you mentioned Cody. The first time you stepped into the ring was with, Cody as Stardust. So, what his career has become during this whole time period as well, going from a character and a gimmick that he absolutely despised to now being the most popular pro wrestler in the world.
I mean, kudos to the guy. I think that anyone, and this is it goes back to one of those universal themes. You don't have to be a pro wrestling fan to get behind the theme of betting on yourself. And that's what he did. And I think that people respect that. And, he's got this but he's got this classic late 80s babyface thing happening. And there's so much virtue behind it that you just have to like it. Unless you're bully over there. You don't have to necessarily.
Cody is a heel, Steven.
Oh, stop. Guys, keep selling.
A heel.
They can't make shirts fast enough for all the people that are buying his T-shirts.
That's true.
Cody, Steven, other than obviously keeping up with Cody and his career, even if you're able to with your busy schedule, what other wrestling do you watch these days, if any?
So I mostly watch the premium live events, and then I'll watch the occasional AEW pay-per-view. I went to one back at the Forum, I think late last year, which was really fun. But yeah, mostly just the WWE PLEs. I'm really enjoying the international shows, although I wish that there would be more substantive things happen at those shows. You could almost always tell that, it's the kind of the bridge to what their next big story is going to be. So it'd be nice if at some time when they're in France or Germany or something, that there's like a major title change. But I do like watching those because I watched them I think I watched Bash in Berlin on Saturday morning, and it reminded me of back in the day when I would go out and rent the VHS tape of the most recent pay-per-view and then not be allowed to watch it on Friday night. So I'd go to sleep and wake up at like 5 a.m. It reminds me of that. But I think that the product that they're putting forth with the WWE right now, and I'm not just talking about the wrestlers, but I think just in general, the product together, the camera work, the photography, the directing, everything has just become so slick. It's really impressive.
Steven, we're hoping for a season 3. Please, everybody watch the show. It's a great show. Take it from me. Seasons 1 and season 2 are now on Netflix. Use that hashtag, please. Heels season 3. And Steven, you've been in a lot of stuff. I couldn't tell you what. But the most important thing is Jack Spade. My favorite TV show, Heels, and you're Jack Spade. And Steven, you do a tremendous job. And thank you for all the hard work. Thank you for making this, this vision into a reality, and appreciate it. And hopefully we get a season 3 of this show. Thank you so much.
Listen, fellas, it takes a village, but if we do get to move forward, your support will have been no small part in it. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it.